Welcome back. Top of the hour on this Friday. We want to get you back right into the courtroom where the prosecutor is continuing her rebuttal in the closings. Let's listen. All right, so you hear there the judge beginning to deliver the instructions to the jury, but wow, that rebuttal, Joseph Scott Morgan, I think you said it best, mic drop. When the prosecutor started reading some of Scott Nelson's original confession, in which he talked about having blood pizza and basically said, you know, he enjoyed every damn bite. My only regret is I hadn't killed 30 more. Wow. I also want to bring in another guest this hour who's joining us, Julius Collins, a criminal defense attorney joining us live via Skype from Atlanta. So, gentlemen, let me start with you, Julius. It sounded like you agreed with Joseph's assessment there. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, double mic drop. That confession within itself, it almost makes you think, why are we having a trial? Yeah, you can try to suppress those statements, but as you heard, the judge obviously let that statement and that confession in. It's grueling, it's chilling, and it's just downright inhumane.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, why are we even having a trial? I think it's a thought that crossed a lot of people's mind because, look, this guy is admitting that he murdered the woman. However, this is a death penalty case, and in a death penalty case, there has to be a trial, I believe. I mean, Joseph, though, what is your thought on, you know, was this trial all, you know, for nothing because the evidence is laid out, not only his confession and on the stand? I mean, obviously, this is the legal process, and prosecutors still have a job to prove all of the charges here. But do you think that jurors may even be wondering, you know, whether there's much to decide here?
Hey, listen, I wax philosophical in these moments. This trial, at the end of the day, was not for nothing. It was done in defense of this victim. And at the end of the day, this was an adjunct. Her homicide was an adjunct to a committed felony. He showed up with intent. He showed up to kill this woman. And boy, I tell you, it's really hard to soften those statements that he made in that confession, you know, as opposed to, you know, what he had said, what they had tried to throw out there earlier, that, you know, she was just collateral. No, she was a target. We knew that all along. And that's what he wanted to do, and by God, he did it.
You know, some people have said, okay, well, this is a death penalty trial, so we know the penalty phase will be coming up next, perhaps as soon as Monday. He's admitting to doing it. He confessed to doing it. Maybe this, you know, the defense will just sort of make a last-ditch attempt to save his life, if nothing else here. But from what we heard, the confession and him on the stand, I mean, is there anything here that suggests that this defendant should get mercy? What's your take on that, Julius?
As a defense attorney, I would possibly argue, even though the issue of whether or not he's competent to stand trial or whether or not he's suffering from some type of mental health issue, I think the defense may play that ploy. Even though it wasn't accepted by the judge, I think if you just listen to the confession, his reasoning for doing so, his testimony from the stand, how he just kind of played back and forth with the prosecutor, not really willing to answer the questions, saying this is why this lady was murdered. And then you listen to that confession again, I think they're just going to try to focus on, hey, Yana, you didn't accept it, but it's clearly something going on with this defendant.
Right.
He needs some kind of mitigation.
Yeah.
He needs something big to happen, but I don't see where that comes in at.
I mean, to your earlier point, he was found competent to stand trial, obviously, and we also know that there was a competency motion that was denied. However, yeah, does the average person see this and say, this is just not logical, it's not right, especially when he was on the stand yesterday and blaming this all on the federal government, blaming it all on the parole officer. No question that he is angry and redirecting that anger somewhere. I want to get your take quickly, Julius, if you were his defense attorney at this point, what are you thinking? Now this has all come to a close. You tried to do your best in the closing argument saying, look, he didn't intend to kill this woman. He just panicked and killed her when she started making noise in his car. I mean, do you feel like, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, as a defense attorney, and you know, you have to prep your client. It's no way that the defense attorneys, I'm sure they knew what he was going to say, but as you know, you can't force your client not to testify. That would have been my first thing, is begging him not to testify, especially if you know how he's going to testify. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of straws you can reach for at this point. He clearly showed his reasoning as to why he killed her.
Right.
So reaching for straws,
And
that's what it would be.
he seemed to think this was a clear and obvious, understandable argument. I could see how his defense team would have a hard time talking him out of it or trying to convince him to testify in any other way. So I think you're right that, you know, this is probably the hand they were dealt. Wow, does this defendant just keep digging himself a deeper hole? He says, yeah, I actually had a gun. I had a box full of casings. I thought about shooting the parole officer, Julio Dominguez. I did, but, you know, he's lucky because God intervened. I mean, we heard the defense attorney there even objecting. It was overruled. But let me ask you, Julius, as a criminal defense attorney, are you just wringing your hands under the table right now as he goes off on these basically tangents?
Yes, because during the sentencing phase, whenever they're trying to determine whether or not he's going to be sentenced to the death penalty, these are the types of statements that you do not need to come out. It takes away any possibility of this guy having some type of mental health issue, because now he's telling you he planned to do it.
Right.
He has a firearm, and when he couldn't go after the person he truly wanted to go after, he just picked somebody else. That's not going to be beneficial whenever they're determining whether or not the death penalty would be imposed upon him.
Yeah, Joseph, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. You know, the old adage about digging yourself a hole, the way you stop doing that is take the shovel out of their hands. And I don't think the defense has the ability to do this with this guy, or had the ability to do it. Because he's in deep, Stacey.
Yeah, I mean that's you know that wasn't the only time they objected during the course of his testimony. It was the only time that the attorney was overruled. I mean, clearly, yeah, this is a runaway train and no one can stop it here. Let's go back and listen to a little bit more. Wow, a lot to discuss about that little clip, but I think one part that caught me the first two times I say it, and here once again, is this little moment where the prosecutor's questioning him about the items that Nelson bought at Walmart, the duct tape. She said, you bought the duct tape, and you remember the zip ties. And he says, yep, don't leave home without them. And then says, oh, a moment of levity, as if he's trying to make a joke here. I mean, I think that was a striking moment. Joseph Scott Morgan, I know you agree.
Yeah, it really was. It's a punch in the gut. Hey, listen, this guy's talking about the protection of God and all this sort of thing, and how it extended to to his probation officer. And I got to say something here. So you chose to go after a middle-aged nanny, defenseless woman who is a caretaker, as opposed to a grown man who's probably armed. And so I think his motivations were a bit different. It's self-preservation, but yet he could still, you know, interject himself into a situation and torture this woman to death.
Yeah, what was your feeling, Julius, on that brief remark on the zip ties? Nope, don't leave home without him, as if he's joking. I mean, quite frankly, you're not even sure if this guy is joking or not, because he is just painting such a bizarre account. I wouldn't put it past him to carry zip ties with him.
Right. I don't think he's joking. I think Joseph just hit the nail on the head. And also just looking at the defendant's demeanor while he's testifying and listening to his testimony, he wants this stage. Having the trial, having the news coverage, I think that's why he chose a defenseless nanny who was middle-aged. He knew she couldn't defend himself. It would get more headlines. I think he wants this trial so he can take the stand and he can just put on a show. He can talk about conspiracy theories. He can talk about who's responsible. I think he thinks it's his attempt to expose the upper echelon of the upper class in this area. I think he wants the attention.
I mean, that's a great point. There's no question here that he wants to tell his side of the story, and that he wants to sort of, like, as you said, you know, expose the government, what it's doing to him and other people like him, because there are a number of times during the course of the testimony he says, this is what the federal government does, and after I got fired from my job, they laughed. That's what you people do, and he's addressing that to the prosecution, too. I mean, look, prosecution, the judge, that's the government as well, right? How do you think that's sitting with the jurors, though? The fact that he clearly has an agenda and he only wants to stay on those talking points at times, it seems. What's your take on that, Joseph?
Yeah, and that is in fact his driver, apparently, this expression of anger. But you know, at the end of the day, he comes off like many of these guys do as a petulant child, that he's not getting his way, the system's against him, all these sort of things. So he's going to strike out. And that's how he can diminish the value of this poor woman and refer to her simply as collateral damage.
Yeah. You know, and to your point about him sort of lashing out like a child, yeah, I mean, once the prosecutor starts asking him questions he doesn't feel like talking about that don't have anything to do with Julio Dominguez, the probation officer, he doesn't want to answer them. And he starts saying, my mind is very foggy. It must be the meds. I don't remember. So clearly he is trying to control how this questioning went yesterday. We're going to take a quick break, gentlemen. When we come back, so much more to discuss about this. Stay with us. All right, so the cross-examination continues there, and at times we see the defendant getting a little bit short with the attorney. We know at certain points the prosecutor had to ask the judge to direct him to answer the questions. There's lots of stuff he says he's not sure, that he doesn't remember that well. And here we get to this part about the pizza, where he had confessed that he enjoyed eating this pizza, this blood pizza as he called it, after murdering Jennifer Fulford. His demeanor here, I mean, he's even sort of smiling there at that last question and saying, oh, you know, well, that's the cops. He said, you know, that's the detectives. You know, he was losing it at that point. What is this, you know, how does the jury read this when the defendant is, you know, pushing back a little to prosecutors and also just sort of has this, you know, sort of trying to make light of things, I would almost say, when he cracks a smile there. What's your take, Julius?
I think in this situation, it's easy to call. He's not, I don't think he's pushing back. It's so much as he wants to take credit, but then he also wants, like the party says, hey, you found the keys, thanks to me. And he talks about the pizza. He wants to say, oh, well, they were jerking me around, but I think he just wanted the attention. And him pushing back, I don't think it's helping him. I think in some situations it can be beneficial to a defendant if you're truly not guilty or you're telling the truth, you're trying to get your point across. But I think he's just baiting the prosecution to give him an opportunity to gloat more and more about this murder.
Right. I mean, it's you could say that. I think he wants to sort of get back and have more opportunities to throw more punches at, you know, the people, his oppressors, the way he puts it, right? The government, the probation officer, the detectives, everyone's against this guy. Joseph, you know, what do you make of his sort of demeanor there and the way he's answering the questions?
Yeah, to Julius's point about the keys, hey, you wouldn't have found them if it wasn't for me. And also he referred to the detective. Well, he was just getting a little hot. You know, he's a little hot under the collar. So, you know, at that point in time, he had to step in. You know, this guy, and it's about what he can do, and that he has probably, you know, a superior intellect to everybody. He's the smartest guy in the room, is what it comes down to. And also, to this point that Julius has made, this guy was really enjoying these few moments, you know, in the courtroom, and just reveling in it. And, you know, these flippant answers that he gives is indicative of this behavior and personality type that he possesses.
Yeah, I mean, and this was a good 90 minutes he was on the stand there. You know, it was a big chunk of yesterday. He certainly had his moment in the spotlight, to say the least. Let's listen to a little bit more. So here, you know, the prosecutor is suggesting, look, you hated jail so much, but yet you made a choice to do something that you knew was going to send you back to jail. You know, it's interesting because he also said there, you know, a line that he said a few times during this, which is blaming the government and saying they turned me into an animal. So here he is, a self-described animal, right? Here's one question I have for both of my guests. I mean, we have not heard him express any remorse. He's the victim here. You know, how is this going to play going into the penalty phase, right? And again, they turned me into an animal. They forced me to do this. What about the remorse for killing this innocent victim? Joseph, let me start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think that for Jennifer, it is it's, you know, what kind of marker is this left for her? You know, because the state has brought this guy to trial, and he shows little or no remorse for you know, the way he has just ripped her family apart, the community apart, and this is, you know, some kind of attack on him by the government over and over again. We keep hearing this, and wow, what a way to straighten out your problems with the government.
Yeah, you could say that, I guess, right? We're going to take a quick break. I want to get Julius's thoughts on this last clip we just listened to as well, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with much more. Stick around. Well, there's the defense attorney saying it wasn't premeditated. He didn't mean to do it. And just because he bought duct tape and, just because he bought these items at Walmart, that doesn't mean you're going to kill someone, right? What do you make of that? I mean, does that even begin to sort of skim the surface when we've heard all of this out of the defendant's mouth leading up to this argument? You know, you're a criminal defense attorney, Julius. In just that snippet there, how do you rate that defense attorney in that bit of closing?
I think he's doing his best as he can. I mean, the evidence is the evidence. You, as defense attorneys, we only go where the evidence takes us. Whether or not we can refute it, or sometimes we just have to concede. I think in that situation, it's duct tape, zip ties, all of these things were actually used in the murder. I think the defense attorney is only working with what his client has allowed him to work with.
Joseph, your take on that? I mean, the zip ties, we've discussed this before. They've come up quite a few times here, but obviously he's trying to minimize the fact that his client did any planning here, suggesting, he bought these items doesn't mean he's going to kill someone. Is that going to fly?
No, I don't think it is. But to Julius's point as well, this guy's doing the best he can with what he has. And that's the beauty of our system. This guy's entitled to a defense, no matter how big a monster we perceive him to be. That's the reality. It's hard, Stacey. Duct tape, zip ties, being restrained all this period of time before he decides to butcher her. That's really hard for the defense to get around.
I think you're right. Now, you see on the bottom of the screen, we have the breaking news bar up because we do know that the jury has now officially begun deliberating just a few minutes before noon Eastern time here. The judge wrapped up the directions. They were sent into the deliberation room. I know it is so hard to predict these things, but I want to get both of your predictions. How soon do you expect we might get a verdict on this, Julius? You think it's going to be a long afternoon here? You think it's going to stretch into Monday? Or you think they're going to wrap this up pretty quickly?
Just based off what I heard, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour,
wow.
maybe.
Wow.
I would say 30 minutes.
I mean, look, there is the fact that there are a number of charges. There's the first-degree murder charge. There's attempted first-degree murder. There's grand theft auto. There's a number of lesser charges as here. So maybe just by virtue of making their way down the list, that will take some time. Joseph, what's your thought?
Yeah, by supper time this evening, I think that we'll have a verdict rendered, and the only thing that's going to be the impediment in this is going to be all of this list of charges that they have to consider. The prosecution's done a bang-up job, and I think, again, the defense has done the best they can. They were really shot in the foot by this guy on the stand.
Where does the defense go next week, assuming we start the penalty phase on Monday? Julius, briefly give me, what would you do if you're the defense attorney? How do you kick off this penalty phase?
I wouldn't show up. Nah, I'm just playing. I think you have to actually look at his statements that he actually saying, his reasoning behind it, and you have to try to get the jurors to believe that this is some type of mental impairment, it's some type of mental defect.
And then they may very likely be wondering that already. I hate to cut you off. We're coming up to our break. Thank you both so much for being with us. As always, we're going to be right back. Jesse Weber will be here right after the break. Stay with us.